Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joe Davich. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. On behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, the Decatur Arts Alliance, the DeKalb County Public Library, and Library Foundation, welcome back to Zoom for a series of artist talks to coincide with The Book is Art, Volume 11, Myth and Magic. It's been a while since we've been on Zoom, so do please forgive us this evening if our timing is a little off and we do have a few little flubs. It seems like forever since we've been on Zoom, after being on Zoom solely for a year and a half, 2 years, and now being back to in-person events. So do give us a little bit of indulgence this evening. Once again, this is the first in a series of artist talks that we are doing for the book as art. So join us for the next 2 Wednesdays, and you can see several more artists speak about their work and their process. For tonight's talk, don't forget that we will use the Q&A feature after the formal presentations if you would like to ask the artist any questions. You can find the Q&A button at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. Click on that and then type in the questions. That way we can be sure to answer your questions in turn. Also, we do have the closed caption feature enabled. You can find the CC button at the top or the bottom of your screen, also depending on your device. And when you click on that button, you can modify the size of the font to make it easier for you to read tonight's presentation. If you'd also like to communicate with us and the artists, feel free to do so using the chat. We'll monitor occasionally through the evening, and we'll be sure to give you links to the Decatur Arts Alliance, the Georgia Center for the Book, and all of the artists so you can view their websites as well. This is, of course, part of Myth and Magic, The Book is Art, Volume 11. Folk tales, fairy tales, and myths are foundational narratives that bridge the secular and spiritual and merge the factual with the fantastical. Myths and magic transport us and bind us together, the world of imagination. This year's annual Book is Art exhibition explores these concepts visually through beautifully made volumes, sculptural and conceptual interpretations, and one-of-a-kind approaches to the book format. The exhibition is, of course, installed on the 4th floor of the Decatur Library, and gallery hours for the exhibition are Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 1 to 5 p.m. and by appointment. The artists joining us this evening are Sally Chapman of Lowell, Massachusetts. Her book featured in the exhibition is Liberation Rising, which is cyanotype, pastels, and bookboard. We are also joined by Ryan Lewis from Kalamazoo, Michigan. His entry is Everted Sanctuaries 6. It is a single-channel digital stop-motion video, which was the first for our exhibition and was awarded the Honorable Mention Prize this year. David Moyer of Muncie, Pennsylvania, gives us Utopia, an artist's book of wood engravings and original calligraphy. Our last presenter this evening is Janet Owen from Belfast, Maine. Her book, Do You Know, features ink and acrylic on polyester mounted as a hanging scroll. Thank you all once again for joining us this evening, and I would like to invite Sally Chapman to talk about her work and Liberation Rising. Sally?
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm very honored to be part of this, the Book is Art, Myth and Magic exhibit. And I wanted to thank the Decatur Arts Alliance, DeKalb Public Library, and the Georgia Center for the Book, along with Allie Stonewright and Joe Davich and anybody else. I'm sure there was a lot more people behind pulling this all together. And it's really great to be with so many wonderful artists. So let me start sharing my screen here. Okay, so a bit about my background. I started out as a ceramic artist. I graduated from Michigan State with a degree in fine art, emphasis ceramics and photography, then moved to Colorado, where I was a ceramic artist for 20 years. I showed a lot in regional shows, including the Denver Art Museum. I was doing photography at that time only for documentary purposes and general snapshots. But eventually, I gave up the pursuit of being an artist. I became disillusioned with the art scene, but particularly the way that I was approaching it. Art had stopped being fun. After that, I got involved with spiritual practices, predominantly in the Eastern traditions. And within the spiritual practice, I began to realize the alignment of the creative impulse as being same as the spiritual impulse. You're reaching for something higher, and it has to be discovered, and it's a constant journey into the unknown. So there's a break in my art career of about 10 years, but eventually I had the urge to create art again. And I had long since sold all my ceramic equipment and wasn't inclined to go back to it. But I was inspired to do photography. So this was about 10 to 12 years ago. And I was working in digital photography at that time, doing a lot of night photography and exploring a lot of different techniques. This time around, being in the art community was completely different. Mainly, I'm continually humbled to see how much great work is being created and feel continually pushed to a higher standard, and blessed to be in the company of many wonderful artists, such as those in this exhibit. It's not about I, but it's about we. So I did a series on the Virgins and Saints statuary that dotted my neighborhood at the time. And this use of statuary continues to come up. But I call this one Yards of Faith. And then I moved into, I discovered cyanotype and other processes that were developed in the 19th century. And for people who might not know cyanotype, it was one of the original processes for fixing a photographic image. People have heard of blueprints, and that original blueprints were made with cyanotype. Or you might have played with sunprints somewhere along the way. I'll go into more detail here in a few more minutes. So there's a lot of experimentation along the way. And this is in my fascination with statuary. This series is called Mythic Nature. And this is where I digitally combine images, recontextualizing the statues into a new setting away from the original urban settings. I print them in cyanotype, adding pastels for color highlights. There's about 25 images in this series, and I've decided it was complete. And what brought me to that conclusion was I was just having this inkling that I wanted to move back into three-dimensional work. And one of the people that I was inspired by was Diana Bloomfield, who also works in cyanotype and other alternative processes. She sees book as sculpture, which very much appealed to my thinking. So I got more and more intrigued by folding pieces and was constantly reverse engineering things that I had seen by other artists. I would find myself laying in bed thinking of new ways to fold. And as I started to search on the internet, I discovered that there was a whole world of book arts that I hadn't been aware of. And as you can see, this one is using some of the images from the Mythic Nature series. So I'm mining different pieces in my studio. A lot of them are, when I created this series, there'd be a limited edition, but some of them were experimental. So I've got these experiments laying around, which are what I've been starting to fold with. And I was using the map fold here and then playing with triangle and tulip folds. So this is the piece that's in the show. And this one, had it been originally been a flat piece, but I love the way folding transforms the piece. And this is the figure in this is either liberty or victory. It's from the statue on Boston Common commemorating the Boston Massacre, and which was, pre-revolutionary event. And this is more of the pieces that are made from in that series, just playing with folding things and seeing where they go. And then I started to combine different images. This is more creating images for the book, and that's kind of how I see pieces now. It's how they're going to go into the book, not how they're going to be a frame piece. And then this piece in the upper left, this came about in Lowell. Here we have a local show that happens most years. Actually, it didn't happen this year, but artists are given a 4x4 canvas, 4-inch by 4-inch, and asked to create a work of art. And then we donate the pieces to be raffled off, and the money is donated to a local charity. As fate would have it, I won my piece back, which I was pretty happy to. I really liked the piece. So this sparked another series using small. And now I'm using these other two are from block books, and I'm going back to digital photography in these. And it's just, as I just love what happens with a book, as you open it, something evolves. It's just, yeah. And then at this point, I was playing around with books, of what I could come up with. And I decided that it might be time to take a class in actual bookmaking to refine some of my skills and learn more about this world that I had stepped into. And so I took a weekend workshop at Mass Art in Boston and discovered flag books. This book is called Cactus Book. And the cactus, I was out in San Diego and photographing these wonderful cactuses that were swooping around in the Botanic Garden. And it's interesting coming to books from, a three-dimensional ceramic background. One of the wonderful things about books is the fact that they move and they're intimate. Well, I mean, ceramics can also be intimate, but this is, you open it, it changes, and you can play with it. Yeah. So I wanted to then I was curious about pop-up books. So I took another course in pop-up books, also at Mass Art. And this is one I created called Piranesi. It's the only piece so far that I've done using someone else's art. But I was able to find a large high-resolution image of Giovanni Piranesi. He's the, I think, 17th century or 18th century intaglio artist, and it's in the public domain. So I was able to download those and print them out. And, he did all these architectural pieces with a lot of stairways and passageways. So it was really a lot of fun to play with, his work with what I was doing with the pop-ups. And then I started to, I had long ago collected some cigar boxes from a local cigar store, which, it was kind of one of those things you just see it and go, oh, that's kind of cool. So I bought some, and then I decided to use some of the pop-up type technology within the cigar boxes themselves. So this is a spiral box here. And then this is I think like forest pond. It's got, you can't see it in the in the photo, and I wasn't able to photograph it right, but in the bottom there's some plastic that looks like a pond, and just trying to elicit the feeling of when you're walking through the woods and you see the leaves floating in the water and all strewn around. And this one is called Blue Leaves. And so this one pops up too. And this was a funny thing to me about this was that I made all these leaves, hand drew them, and then put cyanotype on them. And I thought, oh, I just made this whole pile of them. I thought, oh, this will last me for a few projects. And I used them all in this one. There was, when I counted up how many I used, there's like 80 leaves in this piece that are attached. And also when you open it, the part in the middle moves. So, and then this was of a local belly dancer in the Greek restaurant here. And Eric Demain is a paper artist and mathematician and all-around genius. And he was using these spiral folds. So I picked his brains, and it's been a lot of fun to play with. And then now I wanted to go back. This is the piece again that is in the show. And I wanted to walk you through how the image was created. So these are the original two photographs that were, combined, of course, using a lot of Photoshop and isolating the figure. And, as I said before, she's on Boston Common, and this is a local pond nearby. Now, this is another piece, because I did record this, how these were made, and this one uses 3 different images, and that's combined into this to make the one main image. Oops. And then I lay it out, and I'm using Bristol paper, Strathmore Bristol, and it's works out great for me. One, it's not too expensive, which I always like that aspect, and also it's pretty durable. I can really beat it up, kind of rub around on it and things like that. So anyway, I lay the images, the negatives out, and then I add pastel colors to it, and then I take the negatives off and I brush on the photosensitive solution. This is the cyanotype solution. And when the cyanotype solution is dry, I put the negatives back on in the appropriate places and hold them down under a piece of plate glass. And then they're put out into the sun to be exposed. So then after that exposure on that piece was about 10 to 15 minutes, it's then washed in water, which is what develops the piece. And then it's hung up to dry. So that is my presentation. So thank you very much. And I look forward to if there's any questions down the line.
Thank you so very much, Sally. That was a wonderful presentation. Next up is, of course, Ryan Lewis to discuss his entry, Everted Sanctuaries. Ryan?
Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen really quick here. Let's see. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. So I'm Ryan, and I'm just going to give a little bit short bit about me before I get into my work. But I originally earned a BFA degree in graphic design at Utah State University, and then I worked for 5 years as a graphic designer before I got an MFA also in graphic design at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And now I teach graphic design at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, where I live here, where I work primarily with graphic design students. And I think my experience as a graphic designer and visual communicator has really informed the materials and the processes and the tools that I've used to create the piece, which is in this exhibition, which is called Everted Sanctuaries 6. So first, before I get into that piece, though, here's some context for the body of work that it fits into. It fits into this larger body of work called Everted Sanctuaries. And Everted Sanctuaries explore the idea of introversion. You're probably familiar with this term. Introverts are people who get their energy internally rather than extroverts who get their energy externally. And here is kind of the classic definition by Carl Jung, who developed the term introvert. Introverts are drawn to the inner life of thought and feeling, while extroverts are drawn to the external life of people and activities. And I kind of like to think of this comparison between the two. Compare introverts to the medieval city, where there's kind of walls around the city, and the city sort of survives on protecting itself from things around it and isolating itself, whereas a more contemporary city is more like an extrovert, where it has to have these arteries of connection that connect it to other places and other things. So that's just kind of one analogy I think of when I think of this topic. So, you know, introverts prefer not to be around large groups of people, but out of necessity, they do need to socialize with others at times, and they can cope by pretending to be more extroverted, but this can come at a little bit of a cost. They often need periods of solitude to recover after they've been, you know, around a lot of people. And so I was looking for a way as an introvert to kind of express that feeling, that contradiction. And as I was researching, I learned that some sea cucumbers can actually eject their internal organs to distract predators. And this is a coping mechanism that they use. But it does come with some pretty significant physical implications. I think they probably have to regrow the organs after the attack or whatever, but at least it can keep them alive for a while. So eversion is the term which is used to describe this process happening with the sea cucumber. And that's where the word in the title comes from. Everted comes from that term. So after seeing that learning about the sea cucumber, I started turning different objects inside out, which eventually led me to this body of work called Everted Sanctuaries. And each piece in the series transforms found objects through stop motion. And these transformations function as metaphors for the uncomfortable process of becoming temporarily extroverted. As the objects gradually transform, complexities that can go unnoticed below the surface are revealed. And I see the process as a conversation I have with the materials where I'm trying to discover their full aesthetic potential. The transformations exhibit the strains and stresses of performance and of becoming something that you are not. I enjoy the constraint of picking an object and sticking with it, and discovering what is possible with each object or material. The series has 7 pieces total, 6 of which have 2 animated objects side by side as video diptychs. The diptychs allow for contrast and comparison between the 2 objects. You notice the similarities in physical forms or colors, or the types of motion that the 2 objects have at the same time. That the object is specifically a passion fruit or a golf ball or a jelly donut isn't really what's important, though. What's important is what's happening to the objects and the motion that they're creating. So the diptych format helps keep any specific object from becoming too important and allows the motion to be the focus. However, there's one exception, one variation on this format, which is the piece in the exhibition, Everted Sanctuaries 6, which contains a single object, a book, as you might expect for a book exhibition. But I feel that the facing pages of a book in a book spread also function as a diptych. So in that way, it still kind of connects with the rest of the series, even though it's the only one that's only got a single object in it. And I use Dragon Frame stop motion for my stop motion work, which is a professional stop motion application. Here's some, you can see here some screenshots from within the software. And this is some passion fruit footage that I shot for one of the pieces for Averted Sanctuaries 5. And people always ask me how long each piece takes, and stop motion does take a bit of time, obviously, and shooting can often stretch over several weeks or even into a month or two for each sequence even. And each frame can take maybe a minute to sometimes several minutes, sometimes 15, 20 minutes, depending on the complexity of the motion. So it can be quite time intensive. But I don't usually track how long this takes. So when people ask me, I don't know. I'm kind of glad I don't know. But however, I did go back and look at this footage for this passion fruit that I'm showing here on screen. And I looked at the timestamps from all of the individual images to try and figure out about how long it took me. And I came up with an estimate of about 46 hours on 10 different days. And, with a passion fruit, I had to be kind of careful because it spoils. So and then that's only one side of the diptych, and that doesn't include all of the planning and the preparation and the setup or the editing and post-production that comes after just the shooting. So it is fairly time intensive. So with that background, I'll get into the piece that's specifically in the exhibition, which is called Averted Sanctuaries 6. So as I said, it contains a book. And one of the reasons I chose the book was books fill a critical role as a container for media and communication. And books tend to be a little more introverted in terms of different types of media. There's that public-facing cover that can often draw you in and catch your attention instantaneously. But then the majority of the content and the experience is revealed slowly as a private experience, turning pages, exploring, etc. So the book that is used in the animation I made, and I included text from Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as Holmes is often considered to be an introvert. The text used on the pages of the book contains excerpts from where Holmes is displaying introverted behaviors. And then the animation process for the piece was new for me, however, and different from the other pieces in the series in that it combined both regular manual stop motion with digital stop motion. Stop motion involves a lot of imperfection and approximation, and this kind of gives the final product a lot of vitality and authenticity, kind of a roughness and a life that it wouldn't have if it was maybe perfect. And I wanted the motion of the two types of animation to match and have a similar quality. So to achieve this, I didn't use your typical digital animation platform where you would define a keyframe here and a keyframe there, and then the software would fill in the frames in between to generate a kind of a slick, mathematically perfect motion. Instead, I set the text for the book using the print-oriented typesetting tools of Adobe InDesign and Adobe Illustrator. Then I manipulated the properties of the text a frame at a time. So for example, in one section, I applied a different character style to each letter of the alphabet, and then I was able to move the different letters of the alphabet independently. And I shifted the baseline and the leading a frame at a time and kind of sorted the letters into different categories based on similar shapes and created different bands of texture in the animation. And this is how it turned out in the animation. And then during another section, I made custom typefaces with different symbols in them, with stages of the animation built into the typeface. And I created these ASCII art style animated patterns that you see here. So in a way, the book kind of becomes this digital screen, or a digital screen kind of gets repackaged in a print setting of a book. So it's kind of this strange juxtaposition of those two spaces. And then other sequences I shot with traditional stop motion. So in this case, I printed letter forms on clear acetate and photographed them on a light table. And then I was able to take out the gray of the acetate in post-production. So all you see is the letter forms. I also created some sequences with cut black paper that I cut with a digital cutter. And during another sequence, I also physically deconstructed the book, as you see here. In the end, I think using this time-consuming and imperfect process was worth the time and effort. The two types of stop motion blend well together. The digital stop motion mimics the roughness and authenticity of the traditional stop motion and blurs the boundaries between the digital and the physical. And it kind of leads the viewer to question what they're seeing and how it was made. So you can see in that example there, anything that's outside of the book is actually done with manual stop motion, and anything that's inside the book was done digitally. And then I also include audio with all of my pieces. In this piece, I use the sounds of an outdoor water fountain and a piano. And here's an example. I'll let you listen to it before I start talking about it. Oops. So the water fountain kind of parallels the motion of the letter forms, as you saw there. It works really well with the kind of particulate kind of screen-like pattern that they make. And then the tones of piano give the piece a more meditative quality with a little bit of dissonance and tension that eventually resolves, and also kind of evokes the idea of performance, which is similar to what an introvert is doing if they're pretending to be an extrovert. It's kind of performance. In the end, in Everted Sanctuary 6, ubiquitous exteriors part to reveal internal intricacies, beautiful but unintended consequences of the contortions necessary to fit in. I hope that viewers can appreciate the work on a technical and aesthetic level for the spectacle of seeing objects that move and reveal what's inside them, but also for the ideas that inform these transformations. I hope the work brings awareness to introverts' remarkable ability to adapt to extroverted contexts. And art, I think, has a way of kind of bridging different worlds and bringing people together and helping people understand each other. And I like this quote by Maxine Greene, who says, "We are called upon to use our imaginations to enter that world, to discover how it looks and feels from the vantage point of the person whose world it is. That does not mean we approve it or even necessarily appreciate it. It does mean that we extend our experience sufficiently to grasp it as a human possibility." So the work, I hope, demonstrates the remarkable flexibility of introverts and how brokenness can also become a form of adaptation and beauty. And I'm hoping that as viewers come to see this plain little book in a new light, I hope they can apply that openness to people different than themselves and understand that people are not always what they seem, specifically introverts, but also in the broader sense, misfits of all types. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I do have to say that folks who have been through the exhibit have greatly enjoyed seeing your entry, and I would like to take a moment to quickly thank the technology department at the library for getting us a screen that they just happened to have at the right time for us to be able to do that. I'd like to turn it over to David Moyer to talk about his work, Utopia, And I'd also like to remind you, I see a few questions. If you'd like to ask some questions of our artists this evening, please do remember to type your questions in the Q&A. David?
Hello, thank you for inviting me to be part of this evening. I'll give you a little background first. Actually, I have a BFA and an MFA in ceramics from the University of Delaware and the Maryland Institute. And I do teach in a graphic design department. I taught type for 15 years. I teach primarily foundations courses now at Pennsylvania College of Technology. We're a special missions affiliate of Penn State University. We're a standalone graphic design department. So upon graduating from the Maryland Institute, actually a good deal of my thesis show was printmaking. And I was an intaglio printmaker for 10 years. And then since the mid 80s have concentrated my visuals as drawings and wood engravings. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of the process of how I make a wood engraving and then how I make my books, which usually starts off with books of drawings. My wife and I started Red Howler Press in the late 80s. And so I produce one-of-a-kind books of drawings with text and then wood engravings with, at first, movable type, letterpress printed, but then I moved to hand calligraphy. So I make small editions, maybe 15 or 20 in the edition, and all the text is hand calligraphed. So I will be not sharing my screen, but I've got a table set up here in my studio and my iPhone on a tripod. And so I will be actually showing you blocks and tools and turning pages of books. So hopefully this will work. So let me get my camera rearranged here. Oh, okay, excuse me. Okay, so I hope everybody can see that well. I guess I had it worked out. Okay. All right. This is a wood engraving block. It happens to be made out of, it's the end grain, like cutting on the end of a butcher's block. And the wood happens to be lemon wood, not from the lemon tree. That's the generic name. It's very hard and tight grained and holds the sharp tool. This is an engraving bureau. This is how the images are cut. I draw on the block first with pen and ink, and then I cut away where there is white. So this is a block from a book called Return to Glory. That was the block. And this is the image right here from that block. And so this is a series of portraits of, with a poetic text that's hand calligraphed in each of the books. So that's basically how I start the process of making wood engraved books. And let me see. Okay, this right here is a book of drawings, and that's how my wood engraved books usually start off, with a book of drawings. These are a one-of-a-kind book of ink images. This one's called Form Sniders. Now, the Form Snider was the name given to the German Renaissance woodcut artists. They were part of the Carpenters Guild, and Albrecht Dürer had a Form Snider who would Dürer would draw on the block, and he would give the block to his craftsman to actually cut away the white, like I mentioned in the block that I showed you. So this is a series of actual men, but the images are from, I've taken the liberty of from paintings of the era of people who actually weren't the form Schneiders. I have no pictures available of these individuals. So it's a series of pictures with text, and I'm in the habit of incorporating the text with the actual image. So this is how the process starts. And, I make a number of these books every year, and then I'll pick one, let's say, where I will start then to make the actual blocks. And a block, like I mentioned, will take me about 80 hours to cut. So it will take me a full year to cut, let's say, 10 blocks to make a book. So I usually put out a wood engraved book maybe once a year or so. And then several one-of-a-kind books of drawings. So these are a series of portraits with text of the wood block cutters. I didn't even do one of these for a long time. I consider myself more of a form Schneider. And these are bound pretty simply, buttonhole stitch and Fabriano Murillo boards and St. Armand's paper for wrappers, and the actual shades of the interior of the book. The block is Somerset wove buff. It's a 175 grain paper. And so maybe I will make this into an actually wood engraved book. This is the, I'm hoping that we can all see this well. I might have to adjust this a little bit. This is the book that's in the exhibition. And so this is hand calligraphy on the cover, on the wrapper. And it's actually an accordion book that will open and you can read through as a full, like a regular bound book, or it will stretch out into an accordion. And utopia, of course, the idea of a perfect world here on Earth. So these are the wood engravings, and then each book is hand calligraphed with a text that I wrote, kind of a sort of an apparatchik type of expression. It was like reading an office memo, sort of. And so they take the forms of one large image with one small image in dialogue. And like I mentioned before, it's my habit to make the text actually part of the image. I make a part of the image in blocks, but also in drawings that I do. And the text functions as a text, but it also functions primarily as a visual element, as a graphic mark. And at the end, and of course, then the colophon. I'll go through some other books. This one right here is called Return to Glory, and it's the story. It's the imagined story of my great-grandfather's repatriation back to Germany in 1934 on the eve of World War II at the age of 90. So he was a Franco-Prussian war vet in search of a pension, military pension. And so this is the sort of his trip back across the ocean and his musings while he's on his return journey. Musings and remembering. So it's a wood engraving, and this, of course, is hand calligraphy. This is an edition of 20. And 5x7 for wood engraving is actually fairly big. wood engraving was very popular in the 19th century for newspaper and catalogs. You've all seen maybe the old Sears catalog. Is one of the primary means of pre-photographic illustration for commercial purposes. And he's musing about his days as in the Prussian army, and then what will become of him. Needless to say, he did not live, I don't think, very long after he returned. I think he lived a couple of years, but he was. This is the image that I showed you. The block. Well, I like the wood engraving process because as a ceramicist, I haven't really made any ceramics. And I think the last time I touched clay was 1986. But drawing, I like to draw, but the wood engraving is a nice way to make the drawing three-dimensionality. It's a drawing, but it's also a sculpture at the same time. And I enjoy the labor, I don't make a lot of aesthetic decisions when I'm doing my form snidering, and it's kind of a meditative sort of. I find it very relaxing to concentrate on in a very small area, and it takes some physical strength, and it's a process I find relaxing. Okay, I will go through one more book, and then I guess I will. This is called the Cartesian Reverie. And these are images paired with quotations from Descartes, and the idea of bracketing, the removing of ideas from their context, as Descartes was apt to do, and doubting everything we think we know. And here again, this is hand calligraphy. So the images are in the process of bracketing themselves. Paired with the quotations from Descartes. Now, this image right here, this is calligraphy on the bottom, and this calligraphy is actually cut into the block up here. As is the text that's coming from this image's mouth. As is this text right here. Like I said, I taught typography for about 15 years. I'm pretty much just teaching foundation design classes right now, and a course called Visual Literacy. But that is how I found my way into a graphic design department, was from developing a knowledge of type that I found necessary for trying to sell my books to librarians and be part of that typographic world. I had an opportunity to teach type, and then one thing led to another. So, and this will be the end of this book right here, and the end of my presentation. Let me see if I can get this. All right, there we go. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, David. As we get ready to wrap up this evening's presentations, don't forget, if you'd like to ask any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A feature so that we can answer them in turn. And right now I'd like to turn it over to Janet Owen to talk about her work, Do You Know?
Thank you, Joe. Let me just get here. Okay. I live in Belfast, Maine, and I call myself a calligraphic book artist. These are scrolls that are in the exhibit. The one on the left is Do You Know? And it is 42 inches long by 15 and a half. And then Kindle Many Lights is on the right, and it is 37 inches long. I write with dip pens and brushes using black sumi ink or airbrush acrylics. And the fabric is Hollytex polyester, which paper conservators will use or book conservators as a support when they're cleaning paper and mending books. And then I color it with a starch paint and acrylic mix. And because it's translucent, that's the first fun part of the project, because I start layering, making the layers. And the scrolls are usually 3 to 6 layers of polyester. And then they're mounted as a hanging scroll on a book cloth covered tube with linen thread. I made woodcuts and then worked as a graphic designer and started learning formal calligraphy, which means that I have made zillions of straight lines, trying to get the pen angles right, curved lines, trying to make the O's line up. I learned different alphabets. And the magic for me, which is what drew me to the exhibit, is that you read the word vermilion and a vivid orange color comes to mind. You read nuthatch and this little gray bird flies across your eyes. I learned about palimpsest, and it's when an old medieval manuscript on vellum, and they would scratch off the letters, the ink, so that they could reuse the vellum and make a new copy of a different book. And this is the top example is a 13th century monk's daily prayer book. It was bought at auction in 1998. And when the conservators started working, they could see the faint vertical lines in it. And then using ultraviolet lights, they discovered there was a text underneath, and it turned out to be a 10th century copy of words by Archimedes that had been lost. I also make sewn books, and with that idea of a palimpsest in mind, this book was called Allegiance, and it's about immigration and what it means to be an American. And so I was layering historical texts with songs and poems. And then to the scrolls, this scroll, Do You Know? And it continues how beautiful words are. I made a large brush mark on the third panel and then started working on the first panel. Because it's translucent, I can have guidelines underneath. I use combine words by various authors. So it's like a layering of ideas of history, and then also incorporate my own words. Pulling back the top layer, you can see more of the brush mark. And then there are more horizontal lines on the second panel. This is a detail, and every other line is binary code. I was trying to understand how my computer worked, and I asked my daughters, what's binary code? Is it important? And they said, it's the basis of computer language. And so I think it's beautiful, and it takes me back to writing all my little straight lines and curved lines. This is the front panel again, a detail. And on the left is a column. Well, there are several columns of gold binary code. And so, for instance, 01100001 is A. And it continues on. There's a website where I can paste in a Shakespearean sonnet, press encode, and it spits it right out. And because the text is sometimes hard to read, the words on the panels, I always include type text. The scrolls then can be wrapped and stored in boxes. I always wanted to be a gypsy when I was growing up, so I like things that can roll up and pack away. This scroll is called Kindle Many Lights, and it was based on writings by Rabbi Abulafia, who was a 13th century rabbi, a mystic who thought that letters and numbers were magic. And so a detailed image, and you can see there's letters behind it. And then pulling back the top panel, there's a lighter panel of holly text, and then the large gold letters, gold acrylic letters. What I like about making scrolls is that most books, accordion fold books, have a horizontal layout. With a hanging scroll, I can work vertically. And so this is a short one, and it's only 20 inches long with some tassels on the bottom. And then I was in a gallery exhibit with 15-foot ceiling, so I was able to make a 13-foot scroll. And it was, I just used words by Montaigne from his essays on how to live. And I think I'm looking happy there because I never saw it completely hanging until it was up in the exhibit. And so that was a great relief. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Jan. Well, as we get to the top of the hour, we do have a few questions that I would like to get to. So artists, if you want to go ahead and turn on your videos and your sound so we can have a conversation this evening. The first question is actually for Sally, and it's a guest named Fruma, and she asks, I'm curious why the pastels go on before the cyanotype. Images are exposed and washed and dried. Don't they wash off or get blurry? They look perfectly aligned to the elements that are colored in, so I had assumed that they were added last after the print was made. And could you please talk about how you came to use this workflow?
Oh, well, hi, Fruma. Great to have you here. Fruma also works in cyanotype. And I started, it's a good question about who are we seeing here? Putting the pastels on first, because to get the colors, and I was also surprised that I could draw with dry pastels and they made it through all the washing. They stayed on the paper for the most part. So it was just through experimenting. And also because I'm also using oil pastels. If I use oil pastel underneath it, then because the cyanotype solution is water-based, it resists there, so I get a clean line underneath. And if I were to draw on top of the cyanotype, then you're drawing on top of a dark blue, which is going to really mute the colors that you get. So drawing on the white paper, I get stronger colors. So, and how did I come to that process? Just trial and error. Here we go. Try this, try that. It didn't come out, there were a series before the Mythic Nature that this evolved with. And so then, that was kind of my process when I did the Mythic Nature series. Yeah, so I hope that answers everything.
Excellent. Yep. She seems very satisfied with that response. So
Great.
I am curious, in hearing your presentations, especially Jan and Ryan, how you used text and font And it's very interesting, Jan, you use this old traditional technique of calligraphy, and what a great art form that is, but use binary code. And Ryan, of course, you're using computer technology and stop motion technology and animation and things like that, but still have paper and cut out letters. And I'm curious as, or maybe you all can maybe explain it, sort of like dichotomy. It's like there's a nod to the old, but yet a little bit of the new.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll jump in that I write with dip pens. And so for me, the technology has changed so fast is astonishing. But I love the hand-eye coordination that, writing with letters means. And I do try and make things that a computer can't do. That's my secret goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting just combining different processes and, old processes, new processes, and trying to figure out, how can I get, really interesting results by doing that. So, yeah. Yeah. And like, even the, like I was saying, I made that digital animation with typesetting software, not with animation software. So in a way, that is kind of an older version of, technology that's being used to make something that moves, so it is kind of a making something new with something old in a way too, even though they're both digital. So
I did like hearing Adobe Illustrator being dragged out. I did enjoy that myself. So I think, Sally, I think you mentioned you had we're in a competition where they gave you a 4x4 box or 4x4 canvas and something like that. And then Jan, you mentioned that 15-foot scroll, and even Ryan and David, to an extent, limited by the size of a linoleum block, or what you can do, what the camera can capture. Is there something attractive, or do you find it, do you enjoy the challenge of working with that kind of constraint, and seeing what it helps you produce?
I would say absolutely, just given something, that at that time I wasn't working that small. And and so other times I've done, kind of sculptural images on these blocks, and it's been just you kind of, when you're in the studio, I know for myself, I get kind of in this flow of a series that I'm working on, and then this comes up and it's like, oh, chance to experiment with something else. And so that's my feeling. Yeah, I don't know about 15 feet though. I think that would be really.
It was fun. It was a challenge of, where do I do this? I have a small studio and just laying it all out, but it was fun. I mean, how many times do you get to make something 13 feet tall?
Amazing. And I know, Ryan, you mentioned too, you went from sort of like, with this particular piece, you went from your diptychs to, that sort of like single image that we're seeing as well.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, what was the question though? Sorry.
Oh, it was about working within constraints,
Oh, right. Constraint.
that really, like, all of a sudden bring your artistic powers to the front.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I mentioned this in the presentation, but like I kind of start just by picking what the objects are. And in this case, I actually designed what that book was going to look like. I don't usually have to do that. I usually just pick something and I just have to deal with whatever I picked. So, but yeah, once I had that kind of like defined, what's this book going to have in it? What's the text? What kind of background? Then from there, I just explore and see what I can do. So yeah, I think it's really helpful to have those boundaries defined.
Excellent. And Sally and David, I know that you mentioned that you started out as ceramicists before moving on to other forms of art and finally winding up as book artists. What was it about ceramics that initially attracted you, but then was kind of like easy for you all to sort of like, put down the clay?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just remember, my freshman year in college when I walked through the art department and I saw the ceramic studio. I was just like, yes, that's where I want to go. I don't know where these things come from, but eventually, and I built kills, I built, my studios. I never thought I'd leave it, but there was just yeah, I did. Just other things came up, and now I think that I don't, ceramics is really messy, not that other things aren't, but it's like I think at this point in time I enjoy a somewhat cleaner environment. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I took an elective as an undergrad during the summer. I had to take an art elective, and I was clay has it's a very seductive quality. And I'm sure if you would get Freudian about it, you've got this hand in this mushy stuff, and I just I was going to be a printmaker, and I just fell whole hog into clay. And then when I was in grad school. And one of my instructors had been a printmaker. He noticed I made lots of drawings for all my sculptures. He said, how would you like to make prints? I'll call the guy down in the printmaking shop, and that's fine. And so 80% of my thesis show were prints. My other instructors weren't that thrilled about it, but the man who made the suggestion was the head honcho, so it was okay. But I think I'm a stronger two-dimensional artist for having worked three-dimensionally for that experience.
I have a question for you, David, if that's okay for me. Sure. Because looking at these beautiful books that you're doing, and the draw, so all the images of the heads, those are all prints, or are they drawings? I mean, I'm kind of interested also because they'll be on either side of a page, so I didn't know if you can. I don't know that much about printmaking, so.
Yeah, they're all relief prints. They're all wood engravings.
Oh.
And one of the things about wood engraving is since it's cut on the end, it's like the end of a plank glued together, just like a butcher block. You don't have to deal with any grain in the wood. You can cut in any direction, and you can get a lot of very fine details. And so, some people have mistaken my wood engravings for drawings, but
yeah.
And that's one thing that I like about wood engraving is it makes the drawings three-dimensional. And so, yeah, it's not a problem using the right paper, and if you're sensitive to the press to not worry about making too heavy an impression, back to back. So, yeah, I like the physicality of, and also the fact that there's no chemicals.
Yeah,
I can sit down and do it. When I'm cutting a block, I can cut for 15 minutes, or I can cut for 2 hours. I can go do something else. I can come back. And so if I have a busy day, I can still get some cutting in. Not taking much time.
So these books are all one of a kind? They aren't editions?
Actually, no, the wood engraving books are in editions of about 20.
Okay.
Because of the hand calligraphy. Now, I made larger edition books with a letterpress printed text and all that, but I wondered whether more people would want to buy books at a little cheaper price, or fewer people would buy books at more expensive price. And I don't think my market was really, really terribly broad, so I opted for the more preciousness.
Right.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like a new medium may be tried here from original ceramicists, hopefully. So once again, thank you all so much for giving up your time to entertain our audience this evening. So thank you so much, Sally and Ryan and David and Jan. We hope that you all enjoyed this talk and that you will join us again for the next 2 talks in this series. You can, of course, find all of our events listed at georgiacenterforthebook.org, and you can find all of the artist entries for The Book is Art 11, Myth and Magic at thebookisart.com. Once again, thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
You.
Thank you.